Yeah, hello. This is Jason Sizemore with Apex Magazine and Apex Book Company. First, apologies that I do not have video. You know how it is. You plan a event that is using new tech, which in this case is the airmeet.com virtual booth stuff, and it decides what was working yesterday does not work today. But we do have Jason Sanford here, and he has live video. And since he's the star of the show, um, I think that's okay. The situation is okay. A little bit about Jason. He is the author of an upcoming book that comes out on September 21st called Plague Birds. Um, he is also a very prolific and well respected sci fi and fantasy, dark fantasy uh, author. If you read Apex Magazine or Interzone, uh, Asimov's, you'll notice his name pops up quite a bit. Um, he's also a really cool guy who I've known for a long time, and it's a delight and an honor to be able to publish him. Just don't hold that against me, Mr. Sanford.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Want me to start rambling on? So I'll start. I was going to just do a short reading. I want to read from Plague Birds, but starting on essentially the second chapter where Christina Dan appears. She is the main character of Plague Birds. And just as a way of sharing, part of what I'm reading, the first few chapters actually, Plague Birds started out as a short story that was published in the British magazine Interzone. It won their readers' poll for best story of the year, and then I basically reworked them and expanded those chapters. That story into a couple of chapters, and then kept the story going for the rest of the novel. So this would have been the original where the story started back when it was published as a short story in Interzone. So I'm going to read for just a few minutes here, and then make sure I don't overdo it and get y'all sick of my voice, and then we'll turn it over to Jason Sizemore again. So, Plague Birds, the village. Christina Deanne of the village of Days End cursed as she plowed her wheat fields. She cursed the low clouds scudding over the surrounding hills and valleys. She cursed the trees in the surrounding forest for their network joy at the budding of their new leaves. She even cursed the birds and squirrels who chased each other across air and tree and ground, chattering and singing in happiness that spring had arrived. Krista had never liked working the wheat fields, but this spring was worse because it was her first time behind a plow since the attack. All morning she'd battled her mule, Eggbeater, as they plowed furrow after furrow of fertile black dirt. The mule took full advantage of Krista's injured body, continually stopping and starting, turning left and right, and destroying every attempt to plow a straight line. Now Eggbeater refused to move, pushing Krista's lupine rage too far. She screamed at the mule, who brayed with laughter, causing Krista to kick the ceramic plow in disgust with her injured right leg. Embarrassed, she glanced around the field, praying no one had witnessed her outburst, only to see Bute and Poller walking along the nearby road. Bute waved, acting as if they were still best friends. His bandana, an ancient piece of technology that fed off the emotions of its wearer, rippled with colors. The bandana cycled through the light blues of friendship and the pale yellows of nervousness before settling on the leaf green color of joy. Rip his throat out! Split his gut and spine! Krista gasped as the wolf surged in her thoughts. She fell to her knees, finger gouging dank earth as she fought the urge to chase Bute down and tear him to blood and meat. She wanted Bute and Poller to pay for what he'd done, wanted him to scream for forgiveness. Breathing deep to calm herself, Krista grabbed the plow handles and pulled herself back up. She glared at the road, daring Bew to pretend friendship still existed between them. But Bew was gone. Instead, a deadly flash of red danced along the road, coming to a stop right beside the field. Krista froze, only to be jerked forward as Eggbeater chose this moment to move. She cursed as she yanked the reins. By the time she looked back, the red had disappeared. Krista gripped the reins with sweaty palms. Was it a plague bird? The mule, sensing her fear, brayed nervously. Krista pulled a carrot from her pocket and fed it to Eggbeater to quiet him. She stood on the plow for a better look, her pointed ears tense as she listened for even the faintest of sounds. Her injured leg shook with pain, and she gripped the plow's handles to keep from falling. The red flash had vanished. Was it merely an optical illusion? One of the rare, unmodified cardinals that still nested around here, their feathers as obscenely red as red could be? Kristen knew it couldn't be a villager or hunter wearing red. That color was taboo to everyone. Krista stepped from the plow. Perhaps it was nothing, or perhaps a very dangerous thing was hiding from her eyes. To be safe, she'd return to the barn. Krista bent under Eggbeater to unstrap the mule's harness. The leather straps were slick with dew as Krista struggled to undo them, a task made harder because her bad leg couldn't give her decent leverage. She finally unbuckled the straps and removed the harness, panting far harder than she should have. Only then did she notice the plague bird waving a carrot under Eggbeater's nose. "Hello, Christina DeAnne," the woman said. "I require a place to stay for a few days." Krista couldn't speak. She stared at the woman's scary stalk of red fire hair, at the glowing red line slashing her face from right eye to lips, at the twin red knives sheathed to red trousered thighs. Most of all, Krista stared at the woman's light brown skin, which was far paler than her own. She could almost see through the woman's skin to the deadly blood coursing through her veins. "There's nothing to be afraid of," the woman said in a tired voice, repeating words she'd likely spoken many times in her travels. "My name is Dorina. Please, take me to your father." Despite Dorina's words, Krista wanted to bolt. She remembered the plague bird who killed her mother when she was only a child. The wolf in Krista growled, and Krista fought the urge to keep from fleeing in fear. Dorina's shirt was cut in front and not repaired, a large scar showing beneath the red leather. Plague birds supposedly healed completely from any injury. If this plague bird had such a large scar, maybe Dorina was weaker than she appeared. Maybe Krista could actually escape from her. Noticing Krista's fearful gaze, Dorina laid a hand on the younger woman's shoulder. Krista stepped back, causing her injured leg to spasm and dump her in the dirt, the wolf in her vanishing, along with any thoughts of escaping the plague bird. "Guess I'm not the only one who's had a rough time lately," Dorina said, a gentle smile on her face as she pulled Krista up. "Come, lead me to your home." And that's where I'll stop. Again, I'll hold the book up. Plague Birds. A little segment from there. Hope you enjoy. If you're interested, check it out.
Great job.
Okay, cool.
That was a really good excerpt to read. So the book comes out on September 21st. You can pre-order it right now from apexbookcompany.com. And if you do, you receive a signed book plate of the entire book jacket, signed by Jason Sanford. It's a gorgeous wrapped cover. So,
and it's beautiful artwork by Marcella.
Yes, Marcella Bolivar. She is one of my favorite artists, and very happy to have her do the cover for your book.
I know this is going to sound like I'm, promotion or something, but I hope she gets nominated for some awards for that artwork, because it just blows my mind how good it is.
She has been on a tear this year. If you follow her on social media, she's did some art for several like limited editions and picture books, and they are just flat out incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree. Um, we should be seeing her name pop up for like best professional artist awards and stuff.
Oh, absolutely. She's on my short list. Again, it sounds self-interested, but I mean, when you told me she was going to do the art for the cover, I was trying not to just run around and scream in excitement. You know what I mean?
I was probably doing the same when she accepted. I mean, we hire her whenever we can and whenever we have the money because she's just incredible.
And her art on the new issue of Apex magazine is also amazing.
Yeah, isn't it? She's on the cover of issue 125, so which is the current issue. So a lot of our viewers and listeners probably are familiar with her work, as she's been on our covers 3 different times, I think, which is she's considering we try to hire a different artist every time, she's first, I think, when it comes to appearances on the magazine covers. But anyway, let's talk about Plague Birds and Jason Sanford. You ready?
Sure. Yep, I'm ready. Go for it.
Okay. So the reviews have been rolling in. A lot of people are very impressed with the world building in the novel. Can you walk us through a little bit about like the history of how you came up with the concept of like these Justicars that are AIs inhabiting the body of transhuman, genetically modified individuals, and it's just a lot, and I mean that in a great way, in a good way, because um, when because it's very creative and fascinating, and yeah, I'll let you answer that so I can stop heaping praise on
No,
you.
I hear you. Like I said, originally the first few chapters of Plague Birds, except for the first chapter in the novel, were originally a short story that was published in the British magazine Interzone. Um, but even then, I knew I wanted it to be just the first part of a novel. I've long been fascinated by the idea. In fact, I'm writing an essay on it right now about how most people really don't understand the technologies that underpin our current world. I mean, yes, we talk about, oh, I get Bitcoin and how the blockchain stuff works and all that. But, I think most people don't truly understand, at a deep level, the technologies that have basically are shaping our world these days. And I want to take that to a far future. What happens as it keeps going? As artificial intelligences emerge, as genetic manipulation becomes more commonplace. I mean, humanity has always loved to modify our bodies, tattoos, body art, scarring, other manipulations. So I was thinking, as genetic manipulation becomes a lot more commonplace in the centuries to come, how will people use that to modify themselves? So I want to take all of that, well, along with an understanding that even though people will use this, they may not understand the ramifications of all that technology. And plus, I got to be honest, I love science fantasies. I love it when you have a science fiction story that also brings in dark fantasy tropes and kind of mixes it all up. So I wanted to write a story about all that, but also have it written more like a fantasy, in a fantasy, basically like kind of like Arthur C. Clarke's, famous third law, where basically, any sufficiently advanced technology becomes like magic, is seen in like magic. So that is kind of all of that was thrown in, and I went from there to develop the world building. For the plague birds themselves, as I was developing the world, I realized that the world building that I was creating, there was going to be someone who was being required to enforce the laws, and it just came to me. I said, "Oh, this sounds like fun," and I got to be honest. As I was doing the world building, I was also seeing the characters of Krista and Red Day, and I got to be honest, I just loved how the two of them are bound together, and they really don't get along.
Mm-hmm.
They're not best friends, but they're forced to stay together and work together, and it just had so much potential for a good story about them, and so that's kind of where it went. That's how. Sorry, I rambled so much.
No, that was a wonderful answer. I think, to me, one of the most fascinating aspects is the whole AI entity as judge, jury, and executioner, and it's kind of frightening, especially as we approach a singularity, which I am sure that I kind of think we'll see in my lifetime. So, maybe next 30 years. Do you see, do you also share like a bit of hesitation about where AI could be headed? And is Plague Birds sort of a cautionary tale?
In some ways, yes. I'm somewhat optimistic about where AIs could be headed because I think, I hope perhaps that humanity will create AIs as a reflection of our better natures. And in my novel, I do try to show that there are AIs like that. But there are also, let's be honest, with technologies, humans introduce their own biases into technology. There's this, we almost naively believe that technology is neutral. Oh, technology it's neither good nor bad. It's what we make of it. But that if you look at how the technologies are implemented, for example, facial recognition technology, the facial recognition technology has been inputted with human biases. So it will tag certain people based on race and other indicators at different rates. Just basically it has the same bias as humans do. And it's not that the technology is neutral; it's that we created it based on what we want. So I try to be optimistic, but also I know that we tend to muck things up with our own biases and hatreds and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I think I did write Red Day. I'm sorry, Red Day. Plague Birds as a cautionary tale in some ways, because I do think that there's going to be a lot of unintended consequences to the new technologies, artificial intelligences, genetic manipulation. There's going to be a lot of unintended consequences to all of that. And that's the world of Plague Birds is kind of saying, hey, they have gone through those consequences.
So, Plague Birds, it happens, 30,000 years in the far future?
Oh, yeah, I threw it way in the future, yes.
Yeah, but you do a wonderful job of showing how decisions made in present time affect what happens in your novel's current year, 30,000 years down the road. I feel like that although the book isn't necessarily a very dark piece of literature in terms of plot, it does show a fairly bleak outlook for humans. In fact, non-hybrid humans are very rare, and I get this sense, and apologies if I missed this in my multiple readings of the book, that they are hybridized with various powerful animals as a means of survival. to enhance themselves. Do you see this as like a necessary function of humanity to survive such things as, climate change, technology dangers, war, whatever?
I don't think it's necessary to survive those things, but I think people will do it. I think, people have always wanted to be able to change themselves to do whatever they want. And in this, in the world of plague birds, there's it is said about 30,000 years in the future, but it's also said 10,000 years after the collapse of civilization, which was basically brought on by the artificial intelligences and a lot of genetic manipulation of humanity. Basically, the world fell to violence, and then a new order was built to bring peace. I don't think we have to go down that road, but I think, there's going to be a lot of changes. People will do things because they can. You're always going to have someone who's going to try it. It doesn't mean it's right, but people will do stuff. The one thing in Plague Birds, though, I do try to make it where people can see the whole history of humanity. You've got the character Diver, who's incredibly old and has witnessed all this stuff. And she's kind of anchors people to the past in some ways, because she looks like one of the few non-modified humans in the world, although without no spoilers, there's more to her than that. But yeah, again, it's, and you mentioned, there is a darkness to the book. I mean, it is, like I said, it's kind of a science fantasy, a dark epic fantasy, but I do like to point out, though, there's a lot of hope in the book, because that's one thing I do love, reading dark fantasies, but also I truly try to have hope in my heart. And so people try to move towards the hope. And in this book, I didn't want the story to be gutting people and that just leave them in despair, because I don't think that's an accurate representation of how humanity lives either.
Yeah, it's a very good point. The book isn't like a depressing read. It is hopeful. It's just, 30,000 years from now, there's not, like, human race as we know it now is basically non-existent. So,
oh yeah, but there's still people, and I guess that's one thing I do try to point out with the book, is even with artificial intelligences and the different types of humans that live in the world in the future, everyone is still, including the AIs, are very much human. So I'm trying to make sure everybody sees that in the book, and there's it's kind of like today, there's good and bad, and it's all there.
One aspect of the book that amused me is that the AIs, so each village has an AI that functions as a benevolent protector.
Correct. Yes.
But they also seem to have the attitude that these genetically modified humans would not survive without their assistance.
Correct. Yes. And
yeah, sorry.
That is the attitude, especially. But as the book goes on, people do seem to. I think it comes out that there's a lot more going on than that simple belief in how this is how the world is set up. As Krista goes through explores the world and learns things, she kind of discovers, well, there's a lot more that we weren't told about how our world is set up. And as part of the hint, even though they say in the book that, hey, these village AIs are in charge of each village, and their goal is to help return humanity to a true humanity. That starts, you start finding out there's a lot of deception and questionable belief in all that. I'm trying to avoid spoilers. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Um, in a way, we mentioned the book has its dark elements, but it's also a bit utopic when it comes to dealing with um, the various ways people have become hybrids.
Hmm.
The way they've mixed their genes with animals, um, which was kind of refreshing. A lot of dark SF I read likes to give hecking comic books, right? They're mutants, and they are, unusual. Um,
You say, yeah. And
so,
so that, yeah.
I appreciate that aspect of the book.
Well, I do. I mean, like I was saying earlier, I mean, despite all the changes of the characters in Plague Birds, people are still people. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So yes, there's a range of humanity. There's a range of, since humanity has really genetically modified themselves, there's a range of what people look like and all that. But at their heart, people are still human. Um, so I mean, don't get me wrong. I love grim, dark, and dark, really dark, apocalyptic comics and all that kind of stuff. But I do have an issue. Um, like, well, I'll be honest, The Walking Dead. I'll go ahead and say it. I had to stop reading it at one point because I was like, it's just too much. It's always bleak, and there's never any, goodness in people. You know what I mean? And I said, that's not how people are in the world. Yeah, we have
Mm-hmm.
problems in this world. Don't get me wrong, and we have people who do some horrible things. But there's also good people who try to do right and help others. And I've never liked this idea that in the apocalypse, basically everybody's going to be horrid. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Mad Max, and Fury Road as much as anyone, but there's always going to be good, even in the worst of situations, and people who try to help others and all that. So I really wanted this world to show that, that there are good people here and they're trying to help, and then there are also people who are just trying to get by, and then there are people who are doing some truly horrific things. So it's a range, just like humanity.
Speaking of horrific things, probably most of the horrific violence and gore that's performed is by Red Day,
Yep.
the AI. Uh, and the AI is a bit bloodthirsty as well.
Yeah.
Can you go into why AI these judgment AIs like Red Day, why the artificial intelligence from what 10,000 years ago in the book decided, okay, we have to be the harsh judges and executioners
Right.
over these meat puppets.
Well, there will. I do have to be careful because there are some spoilers there, and I don't want to give that away. But the belief was that because humans have, um, there's this belief in plague birds that we have to return humanity to a true humanity, which I think the book kind of just shows that that's kind of a wrong belief. But they think that unless you are really threatening people to do right, they won't do right, which the book, I think, questions that, but that is how the plague birds are set up. They are the enforcers of the world. Um, it's not really a spoiler to say that they were the winning side of a war 10,000 years ago. So this is how they kind of maintain the social order and world order, so to speak. Um, Now, Red Day is the AI that's bonded with Krista as the plague bird. Again, there are spoilers. I don't want to go into too deep, but Red Day um, is somewhat of a fanatic on, you're supposed to follow the rules, and if you don't, it's, I'm the one that's going to punish you. Obviously, Krista does not agree with that, but they're stuck together. So, as one of the world's enforcers, um, and you mentioned earlier about the scary thing about someone being both the judge, the jury, and the executioner. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that is something to fear. We should not trust, even if it is an artificial intelligence doing the judging, and they have access to your memories and everything. You should not trust anyone with that much power, which is why in this world, um, the plague birds are feared, even though they are supposed to, you know, only punish the wrongdoers. People still fear them because they have so much power. So there's, you know, it's not a good thing, and I am, and part of it was it's a fun idea to explore, but also I was kind of writing about something that some thoughts I have about current situations and stuff like that.
Awesome. Okay, so the people who are at the table here with us, I wanted to open up the Q&A to questions from you all. You can either type them in the chat, or if you like, hop on audio, video, and interrogate Mr. Sanford yourself.
And I can also happy to answer any questions about. I also published a lot of short fiction in different magazines. I can talk about that, and also write my Genre Grapevine column every 2 weeks. So I know a good decent a bit about kind of the behind the scenes stuff and the publishing.
I'll bet you're a fun person to gossip with.
I can gossip. But I do try to be tastefully gossip.
Yeah. No, I really enjoy your genre news.
Well, one thing, thank you. No, one thing I'm actually working on for the next genre column is, and you may have seen this, Jason. There is it looks like there may be an emerging book shortage this fall.
Yeah.
I guess a lot of publishers are having trouble getting copies of their books out there. So if it's starting to look like it, there's a book coming out this fall that you want, you better get it soon, because the publisher may not be able to reprint that book if it does well for 6 months or more. Paper shortages and other issues. So that's one thing I'm working on for my current column.
That is such a germane topic. I've been harping on this all week. So, like, for Apex, just in the past 3 months, the price of paper has went up 6%. The average postage cost has went up 5%. And, you're thinking big deal, that's 11%. Well, publishing has a very notoriously short profit margin, and taking 11% when you're only making a 50% profit margin, that's tough. And on top of that, distribution channels are being disrupted. It is taking printers a lot longer to fulfill orders. It's a mess right now.
I mean, the good news is none of that affects the distribution of ebooks, but yeah, it's going to. A lot of small publishers are saying it's hitting them, but it's also the big publishers are kind of scrambling too, which is unusual. Usually, stuff like that doesn't hit the big publishers like a Tor, Macmillan, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it is. So, and unfortunately, the bad news is, in the long run, that's also going to hurt independent bookstores. Amazon will not be hurt too much, let's be honest. But your independent bookstore, if they have a book that's selling well and they sell out, they may not be able to restock it. Well, people are still going to want to buy that book. They'll go somewhere they can get it, like Amazon.
Yeah.
So I fear this could hurt independent bookstores too, along with small publishers and all publishers.
Yeah, everyone in the food chain gets hurt with this. Yeah. And it's unfortunate. I guess readers will have to lean more on ebooks. Yeah. Although that sucks for the bookstores.
Exactly. So we'll see. Like I said, that'll look for my next column. Hopefully, try still digging on all that, but have that and some other stuff coming out too. But
All right. Do we have any questions from the table? I can't see the chat, so if I'm relying on Becky to.
I see a question. I can. Um, says, could you possibly talk about the difference between writing short fiction versus a full-length novel? Is it intimidating or freeing to have more space to tell your story? I gotta. For me, it was intimidating with the novel. I really love the short fiction form, and I think I'm not trying to sound like a braggart, but I really think I'm pretty decent at it. I get an idea, and I love just writing it, be able to write a 5,000, 10,000 word story, and it really focuses you, and I love that. With the novel length fiction, it was an adjustment for me, and like I said, Plague Bird started out as a short story, but then I realized, it's like the world and the characters. I've got to keep this going, so I didn't expand the short story. I basically used it as the first few chapters, and then it kept going in the novel. But unfortunately, it was not the first novel I wrote. I've got 2 trunked novels that just didn't work out. So it wasn't like I was a total newbie at this, but I finished the draft. I thought it was pretty good, but then I realized there were some major issues I had to address. So I had to do a major rewrite to the entire novel, and I wish I had plotted it out better so I didn't have to do that, because my rewrites on Plague Bird actually took longer than writing the initial draft. So yeah, for me it was intimidating, but I gotta say, not everybody's like that. I know a lot of writers who find the novel writing form to be far easier than short fiction. They tell me, hey, I just can't write a short story. If I start writing, I have to keep it going. So I think it's different. It's what you're are more comfortable with. With short fiction, you definitely have to stay focused, and you can't really go off on tangents. You got to keep that story focused, because if you only have 6,000 words to work with, you can't waste 1,000 of those words, or 1/6 of the story, on something that's really not overly germane to the entire story arc. With a novel length fiction, you do have some more flexibility to explore secondary characters, secondary plots, and that's one of the reasons novels can be so much fun, is that they can. It's almost like more real life. Things go off in tangents, and it's not always a direct line to the end of the story. So yeah, it's kind of, yes, for me it was more intimidating, but not every writer's like that, and I still am writing short fiction, but I'm working on some new novels too. So did that kind of answer the question?
No, I thought that was a good question. Thank you.
Cool.
Any other questions from the mysterious chat that I cannot see? You also can speak up via audio video if you want.
I will say, following up on the comment about short fiction, back in decades ago, if you were trying to make it as a writer, we're talking 50 years or more ago, and I'm not that old, but I mean, reading how the history of the genre was, back then writers would start out in short fiction, because there really weren't a lot of markets that published novel length fiction at the time. Short fiction magazines were kind of the apex predator of the science fiction and fantasy genre. That's where everybody went. Then things started. Then in the 60s, late 50s and 60s, mass market paperbacks and stuff and hardbacks opened up the market for genre nonfiction, genre novels. So suddenly that became where writers went. So initially, like I said, when the genre started, if you were trying to make it as a writer, you first wrote short fiction. For decades you didn't have to. You could work on your novels, and you never had to publish a short story. I kind of think it's starting to come back around, though. There are so many great short fiction markets. Apex Magazine, to name drop. uncanny, Asimov science fiction, fantasy and science fiction, just Lightspeed. There's so many wonderful Beneath Ceaseless Skies, so many markets for short fiction that, again, writers, you have an opportunity to kind of make a go at it initially as in short fiction. And one benefit of that is you can practice your story writing, work on your voice and all that on short 6,000, 10,000 word stories, where you're not, with a novel, if you try doing experimental and learning stuff with a novel, you're committing to 100,000 words, and that's a long writing process. So I think we're again seeing a lot of writers kind of finding their feet, finding their way with short fiction, and then moving into novel length fiction. So I think it's kind of come back around in the genre. Unless you, Jason, unless you totally think I'm blowing smoke in you.
No, I think you're right. Some of the reasons are, a lot of the best fiction is online now. The fact that there are a number of pro level markets, which gives writers an opportunity, more opportunity and more instances to read. Let's see what makes a top tier story as opposed to I used to, you had to go out to the bookstore and buy the old digest and what have you. So
yeah,
I agree with you. So we have 10 minutes. We're talking with Jason Sanford, author of the upcoming book Plague Birds. Look at that incredible cover art by Marcella Bolivar. She will be our guest tomorrow at 4 p.m. So maybe, Jason, you want to pop in and we can praise her together.
I haven't even met her virtually, just talked to her by email.
Yeah.
I bow down to her glory. I mean, my goodness, she's such an amazing artist.
Yeah, I would love if we had, a table full of people just praising her. That would warm my heart, because I think she'd be so overwhelmed and blushing and happy, because she really is a really nice person and someone you really like. Yeah, I like her success.
That's a nice thing, is when people you admire in the genre, artists and writers, are also nice people.
Yeah, you always hear, be careful meeting your heroes or people. But most of the time, honestly, it works out. Most people are really nice, and she is one of them. If you are interested in the origins of Plague Birds, coming out very soon on the website, which is a novelette that was published, I think, back in 2016.
Something like that.
In Interzone, which is one of the early stories set in that universe.
Correct. Yes, it was the second published. The Ever Dreaming Verdict or Plagues.
Yes.
That's a mouthful of a title I made. Sorry about that. But it was the second Plague Bird story. It came out after like I said, the original story came out in Interzone. It was also very well received. Dune Steve did Audio Fiction Magazine did a audio version of the story, and it was a finalist for the Parsec Awards. That story, which is in the current issue of Apex and will be online soon, is not in the novel. It's a standalone Plague Bird story, and totally separate from the novel. I mean, in the novel, it does reference one point their adventure there, like in a single sentence. But basically, it's from the early part. If it was fitted into the novel, it would be in the early parts of the novel when Krista and Red Day have recently become a Plague Bird together. So thanks. And yeah, check it out if you like. If you enjoy reading Plague Birds, the novel, look for that story too. You can get more of your Krista and Red Day fix.
Or if you just wanted to kind of get a feel of what the novel would be like.
Exactly.
I think that novelette.
It's a free way to check out the story and a free way to find out if the world is something you might be interested in.
Mm-hmm. That's at apex-magazine.com, of course. Um, any final words of wisdom?
I wish I had some wisdom. I don't. But no, thanks for having me on here. And again, I'm thrilled. Someone asked me what was it like working with Apex on this book, and it's been wonderful. I mean, I can't be happier how y'all have done on releasing this novel. I mean, just not just the cover art, but everything has gone well. So
Well,
I'm
thank you.
excited for it to finally come out next week. And like I said, so far it seems like our early reviewers are really liking it. So fingers crossed. We'll see.